Morning, everybody. Welcome to Time with the Bible Live. We've just been going through the Gospels and looking at different moments, different events that occurred in Jesus's life. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late this morning. I had a little bit of problem with the internet, and so I'm at a place. I'm in my office this morning. That's going to be a little bit better for us, I think. So we're going to be in Mark chapter 1. If you want to open your Bibles and turn over there, we're going to just go through the text, talk about some things of application for each one of us as we go through here. We're most certainly glad that you've joined. Appreciate everybody being on here. Okay, so Mark chapter 1. We're going to think about this day in Jesus's life where Jesus he heals Peter's mother-in-law, but there's also several other things that we can look at. There's a few things that happened during that day on that. In the text. Now, it is found in Mark chapter 1 and over in Luke chapter 4, the same events, same things that are going to occur in each one of those accounts. I'm going to use Mark's account because it actually shows us that this is a day, that all these events that happen. I think one of the things I see in that is that Jesus was a busy man. There are a lot of things that happen in one day in Jesus's life. I think what John finishes his gospel by saying that there's all kinds of things that Jesus did, but he couldn't write them all down for us to read them all, because otherwise the whole world could not contain the books that are the books that would contain everything that happened. So we're going to be in Mark chapter 1. We're going to begin there in verse 21. I've already covered this event. I think somebody covered it with me in Mark 1, 21 to 28. We looked at this casting out of this demon here in the synagogue. But we're going to go through it quickly and then look at some of the other events that happened on that exact same day as well. So Mark chapter 1, we'll begin there, verse 21. It says, "Then they went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and taught. And they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught as one having authority, not as the scribes. Now there was a man in their synagogue with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, saying, 'Let us alone. What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Did you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God.' But Jesus rebuked him, saying, 'Be quiet and come out of him.' And when the unclean spirit had convulsed him and cried out with a loud voice, he came out of him. And they were amazed, so that they questioned amongst themselves, saying, 'What is this? What new doctrine is this? For with authority he commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him.' And immediately his fame spread throughout all the region of Galilee." So he's in Capernaum. It's the Sabbath. He's in the synagogue, which is like a Jewish church building. And they are just amazed at his teaching because it's not like any of the other religious leaders of Jesus's time. The religious leaders would say things like, "I teach in the name of Rabbi so-and-so," or "Rabbi so-and-so says this." Jesus would say things like, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." Or, "You've heard it been said, but I say unto you," or verily, verily, I say unto you." Jesus taught like he was in control, like he's the one that has the authority to speak. And they're just amazed at the way that he is teaching. And so during the time of his teaching, a man comes into the synagogue with an unclean spirit. And when he approaches Jesus, he cries out to him. He says, "Leave us alone. What have we to do with you? We know who you are. We know what you can do." And Jesus rebukes him. Now, it's interesting. Jesus tells him not to say anything. But that makes sense, because you really wouldn't want to have advertising from the devil. You really wouldn't want the devil to be your spokesperson. And so Jesus tells him to be quiet. And then he commands the spirit to come out of him, and the spirit convulses him and comes out, and all the people are just amazed. And they understood. You think about the way he commanded them, because think about it, what's going on. We're setting up, it's on the Sabbath, where no work's to be done. And they're kind of watching him, seeing what kinds of things he's going to do on the Sabbath, so they could find something to put him to death on. And Jesus, instead of touching him, instead of doing something that they would consider to be a work on the Sabbath, he speaks. The very words that they were amazed at, that spoke with authority, not just claimed authority or spoke like he had authority, but it proved that he had authority. And the people understood that, because it says that they said, "What is this? What new doctrine is this? Or what new teaching is this?" Even the demons obey when he commands. With authority, he commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him. And so the people understood that his words, his teachings were authoritative. They grasped that it was with his words he spoke with authority. It was with his words he commanded the demons, and they obeyed him. And the truth is, with the same words, Jesus commands us things, and we shouldn't let the spirits outdo us on this. We ourselves need to obey what Jesus says when he commands things. And so I want you to notice in verse 28, it says, immediately his fame began to spread all throughout all the region of Galilee. People started talking, and as the gossip train usually is, it's pretty quick to get around, but it's not gossip. This is the good news of the authority of Jesus speaking with authority. And so I want you to notice in verse 29. So that's what the morning's like. And like I said, we've already covered it in previous Bible studies. But I want you to notice in verse 29, now as soon as they came out of the synagogue, so we're talking about same day, a new event's going to take place. It says, as soon as they came out of the synagogue, it says they entered into the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick with a fever, and they told him about her at once. So he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and immediately her fever left her, and she served them. So they come out of the synagogue after he's cast out this demon, and they go into Peter's house, Peter's wife's mother. I want you to understand a few things about that. One thing we learned from that is that Peter was married. And there's a religious significance to that, because we know that there are those who teach that Peter was the first pope, and the pope is to not be married. Problem is, Peter was married. Peter's married, and his mother-in-law is sick. And so all the apostles come to him and say, Jesus, she's sick. And what's wrong with her is she has a fever. Now, Luke, the doctor, as I said, Luke 4 has the same events. Luke, the doctor, adds that it was a very high fever. I don't know if you've ever had a high fever before, but you don't really feel real well. You just have no energy. You know, high fevers have killed people in a lot of scenarios. And so if you've had it for a while, it really runs you down. And but I want you to notice Jesus took her by the hand and he helped her up, and immediately the fever left her. You know, when you are sick from something and you get over it, a lot of times it takes a while to get over it, right? It takes a while for you to get over it, but immediately the fever leaves her like she never even had it. You know, when you've had a high fever and you're recovering from it, and if you was to get up from your bed and try to work really hard at things, do things, you'd probably end up right back in bed. Because like we say, we got to get our strength back. You know, it takes some time to recover because your body has taken such a huge hit. But I want you to notice what it says. It says when her fever left her, she got up and she served them. That's really amazing. I think that teaches us something about Jesus and his authority, and it teaches us something about his healing. Because his healing, it wasn't like somebody was healed of something and then they went and they took physical therapy and they got better over time. Like, a lot of times that's what people will call a miracle today. But see, the miracles of Jesus was immediate. That's the word that Mark uses all the way throughout his gospel. It says immediately her fever left her. It was immediate and it was thorough. It was like they never even had the disease, the sickness, the demon in the first place. It was like he just took them back and put them back to where they were before they had their ailment. I think in Acts chapter 3, when Peter and Andrew healed the lame man, it says that he was jumping, leaping, running. He was using his legs. If you were to have some kind of issue with your leg and you're paralyzed in your legs and you have it for your lifetime or for years, what happens to your legs? Apathy, I'm not using the right word, but it sets in, and your muscles begin to deteriorate. And for you to gain back your strength to walk, you have to build them back up. That's why physical therapy is so important. But that's not what Acts chapter 3 is like. This man is jumping, leaping, and running and testing out his new legs. And it was like he never even was paralyzed in the beginning to start with. The miracles of Jesus were immediate, and they were thorough, and they were complete. And so the same thing is for Peter's mother-in-law here. Look in the next section, verse 32. It says, at evening. So we've gone from being in the synagogue to coming out and being in Simon and Andrew's house, to in the evening. We're going to read. It says in verse 32, at evening when the sun had set, they brought to him all who were sick and those who were demon-possessed, and the whole city was gathered together at the door. And he healed many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons, and he did not allow demons to speak because they knew him. I think it's interesting in verse 32, it seems as if the news of the demon in the synagogue and the news of Jesus' mother-in-law being healed had spread throughout all the region. And now that evening had come, and that's an important point to this, because remember, it is verse 31. It is the Sabbath when he enters into the synagogue. This is a Sabbath day, one Sabbath day. And so when evening comes, Sabbath day was over. That was the way the Jewish days worked, was that the day began at sunrise and it ended at evening. So when the Sabbath was over, they were in the clear to bring all their sick and all those who were suffering, all those who were demon-possessed. It says the whole city gathered together at the door. They were all there to see Jesus. And he says he healed many with various diseases. There wasn't a sickness that Jesus couldn't heal. There wasn't anything that somebody brought to him that Jesus was puzzled about. He was able to conquer every sickness, every disease that came his way. It's interesting. It says that he also cast out many demons, and he didn't allow them to speak because, again, he doesn't want Satan to be his advertiser here. That's like cozying up next to Otis the drunk in Andy Griffith's show. You don't want people thinking that the drunk is your best friend. That's, you don't want people thinking that you do the same thing that he does. Well, Jesus is not looking to be connected to the devil in that sense either. And so it says they knew him, just like the one in the synagogue. They knew him, but he told them to be quiet. Now look there in verse 35. In verse 35, it says, now in the morning. We're talking about at sunrise. He says, having risen a long while before the daylight, he went out and departed to a solitary place, and there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him. And when they found him, they said to him, everyone is looking for you. But he said to them, let us go into the next towns, that I may preach there also, because for this purpose I have come. And he was preaching in their synagogues and throughout all Galilee, and casting out demons. And so now we're talking about in the morning. So it was at the evening time when they were bringing their sick and their disease and those who were demon possessed, and he was healing everyone, and everyone was gathered together. It was this huge gospel meeting, successful gospel meeting, where people they had need of Jesus. They were listening to Jesus. But it says in the morning, where's he at? Before even the sun rises, it says he's out in a desolate place praying. Jesus, it's like Jesus didn't sleep at times. In fact, there are parts in this gospel, in this particular gospel and other gospels, where it says there were times when Jesus didn't eat, he didn't sleep, but he didn't sleep. He's cutting into his sleep time, but he's just out in a desolate area where no distractions, and he's praying. I wonder why he's praying. Why wasn't he sleeping? Why wasn't he, doing something else, trying to just get away from the crowd for a while? Well, I'll say this. I think when we read the Gospels, we see that Jesus set a huge priority on prayer. It was really important to him. But I think there was a reason for that. He really loved his Father. And I think he missed his Father. And Jesus understood the importance of talking with his Father. And I think that's a precedent that ought to be something for us as well. His disciples ought to be characterized by those who continually pray, those who find value and pray, and even make sacrifices to make sure that we are praying. And so he's out in the solitary place, he's praying. Meanwhile, they have been looking for him. There's this successful gospel meeting going on, this revival going on back in the city of Capernaum, and people are searching. Where'd he go? Like, they're all looking for him. That's a pretty good problem to have. Listeners and followers, people who are looking for the teacher. And so he says, what are you doing out here? Everybody else is looking for you. But I want you to notice what Jesus says in verse 38. He says, let us go into the next towns that I may preach there also, because for this purpose I have come forth. Jesus understood that he didn't have much time left. And his priority was not just spending time and being popular with people that liked him, but his priority was preaching and teaching the gospel and spreading. There were other places that Jesus had not yet gone. And so Jesus was looking to spread the gospel, for others to be able to hear the good news for which he came. And that was to seek and to save lost people and to help them. And so it says he went out preaching in the synagogues throughout all of Galilee and casting out demons. I think the other thought I had before we leave this is that Jesus didn't prioritize being popular. That was not his priority. His priority was preaching and teaching about the kingdom. And I think that ought to be our priority in our life as well. And it's not about making a name for ourselves. It's not about being popular. It's about preaching and teaching the gospel, the good news, preaching and teaching about the kingdom and about what Christ has done for us. I'll look at the next section real quick. It says, now in the morning, we're talking about, so we have this next morning there in verse 35. So we have this day, Jesus's day was filled with preaching and teaching. And even the next morning, he's about to take off and go and continue to preach and teach in places just like Capernaum. And so Jesus was a busy man. And I think that's helpful for us to see. I think it's really helpful for us to look at a day in the life of Jesus. I guess that's what I could have titled this. Maybe that would be a better title for us. But we see authority. We see how people should respond to Jesus when he speaks. We see the authority of Jesus in his healing and in what he can do for us as far as our healing. The next chapter, in chapter 2, we see that the healings of Jesus was just a foreshadow of the real healing that he came to bring into our lives. That's the forgiveness of our sins, the removal and the freedom that we enjoy in Christ. And we also see priority of prayer, and so let's and priority of preaching and teaching God's kingdom, God's message, God's gospel. All right, thank you guys for joining. I hope that was helpful for you. It was helpful for me to go through and look at again. But I'm glad that you were able to be here. If you have any questions, any comments that you would like to make, please make sure to do that. I'm able to answer any questions. Go back. It'll alert me, let me know that you have a question or something that you want to add to the discussion. And if you didn't get to watch the beginning, please make sure to go back and watch the recording. But I hope everybody has a great day, and God bless everyone. God bless.